Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us on today's webinar, our second of a series of webinars as part of one of your benefits of being a member of MSPA. Before we start, if you have any questions along the way, please use the chat feature at the bottom of the page. We'll try to answer as many questions as possible as time allows. Robin Hanson is going to be doing our presentation. She's with Wordsmith Pros. And so Robin, if you want to start.
Welcome to Fundamentals of Great Report Writing. So picture it, you've returned home after completing your shop, you've kicked off your shoes, grabbed a cold beverage, you're seated in front of the computer with your shop notes, and it's time to create your report. So we know that all companies want a detailed, accurate, well-written mystery shop report, but how do you do that? What factors contribute to the creation of a report that gets you the highest shopper score and avoids pesky returns for revision? What common mistakes should you avoid? What makes a report that's not just good, but great? So today we'll answer all of those questions and more. I'm Robin Hanson. I'm the Director of Editing for Wordsmith Pros. So how do I know what I'm talking about? We've been in business for 14 years and have proofread just about every type of shop out there, from fine dining to fast food and everything in between. I've been a shopper, I've been an editing manager, I've worked on the client services side. Prior to that, I was a retail store manager who was shopped, but more on that later. So why do mystery shop providers use editors? What exactly does the editor do? So the editor's role is multifaceted. Verifier, reviewer, fact finder, proofreader. The goal is to deliver a report to the client that's fact-based, that's accurate, that's free of contradictions and inappropriate comments, and is an easily readable account of the shopper's visit. And it has to be delivered in a timely manner, which is usually 72 hours, within 72 hours of the shop visit. So the editor verifies that the guidelines were followed and that the required collateral is attached, reviews the comments and question scores for accuracy and to ensure the story makes sense, uses their fact-finding skills to clear any discrepancies with the shopper, proofreads the report for compliance to grammatical and spelling standards. And so there are 6 key points to creating a great report, and those are adherence to guidelines, details, accuracy, objectivity, mechanics, and then probably the most important, which is timeliness. Mystery shopping is a great tool to assess employee performance, but it's most valuable within a short window of time after the visit. So any delay that's caused by untimely initial submission by the shopper or by resubmission of a returned report can impact the delivery to the client. Always check with the mystery shopping provider for whom you're shopping to verify their standards, but the most common submission standard that we see is within 12 hours of the report or midnight the same day, whichever comes first. Revisions are usually due within another 12 hours. So the need for revisions can chip away at that 72-hour deadline, which we want to prevent. If the report does have to be revised, be sure that anything that the editor asked for has been completed at the time that you resubmit it so that it's ready to go. If an upload is required, such as a business card or a quote, attach it to the report instead of emailing it, which can cause further delay. Also be mindful of follow-up. If an associate has 48 hours to follow up with you, for example, don't submit your shop until the window has passed. Again, that's something that can vary between providers. If you communicated with scheduling to let them know about a reason for late submission, put a note on the report. Scheduling and editing are separate channels. They certainly speak, but they don't always overlap within the time that you are submitting your report. So the next key point is guideline adherence. A shop that adheres to all guidelines is one that's most credible to the client. And any bend in the rules can suggest that the rest of the report might not be accurate. So always before your shop, be sure that you check and double check your guidelines for restrictions on date, time, order requirements, reimbursement, scenario, any required collateral like a business card or a receipt, any special questions that you might need to ask, and if it's required to obtain an employee name or a descriptor. And so this is something that the editor will always check as a very first step to editing. Be sure you're checking the address. So many times we reject because the shopper visited the gas station that's around the corner from the assigned one, for example. Watch for clustered locations of the same retailer and for roads that cross through several municipalities. If something went awry, like the store was closed during the hours that it was supposed to be, or something, where there was no one working for some reason, be sure that you put a note on the report so that the editing team is aware. If employee name wasn't captured, for example, or if you weren't able to meet any other criteria, say, for example, because the name tag was covered by long hair, make a note of that so that the editor doesn't need to go back and question it. Accuracy is the next point. So you'd be amazed how many times we correct the AM PM designation. That's probably the #1 shopper error that we see. It would stand to reason that you didn't have a 7-course meal at 6 a.m. that the editors must verify if it's incorrect. Make sure that the photos match the visit. Geolocation apps are great because they tag the location, date, and time of the visit. I like Timestamp Camera, which is a free app. It stamps all the required information right on the front of the photo at the time the photo is taken. Name your files with the date to avoid uploading a duplicate image to another shop. And so most software platforms have a feature that will flag a duplicate photo, but that's something it's a very common reason for return. Make sure that the receipt is correct and that the information you put into the report matches what's reflected on the receipt. So check your dates, times, order requirements, and of course your expenses and tips to be sure you're properly reimbursed. Make sure that the comment scores and questions match and do not contradict. Make sure that your timings are correct. Ensure that if the report has a recording, an audio or video, that the comments in the report match what's reflected on the audio, since it's likely that the client receives a copy of that. Be careful to not mix details between shops, especially if you're doing many shops on a certain day. It's very common. And be sure that the employee names are consistent and spelled correctly within the report. The next point, details. So a detailed report walks the reader through the visit in a way that makes them feel as though they were there with you. Communicate the details you know because you were there. Did the associate make eye contact and smile sincerely, for example? Or did they have an eye on their phone the entire time? Did they make suggestions or did they let you lead the interaction? Make sure the comments are in the right text field on the form. For example, exterior appearance comments should not appear in the food quality section. Make sure the comments address the questions asked. So if the form asks for the open-ended questions the associate posed of you to learn your needs in a storage unit, the comments shouldn't talk about the falling ceiling tile in the unit. Watch for the use of superlatives. So superlatives are like good, better, and best. They have a place, when you're talking about comparisons, but we're looking to explain why an item or experience was good or lacking. So instead of saying the steak was good, you could say something like the steak was tender, it was cooked to order and served hot, as an example. Avoid the overuse of qualifiers like very, really, or somewhat. So these words they limit or enhance other words, but they're not descriptive. So an example, the associate was very helpful. A better choice would be the associate spoke clearly, explained the sales, and made suggestions. So that explains why the performance, why she was helpful. Don't just parrot back the questions. This tells us nothing. The question says, did she ask you for ID? She did ask for ID. Not especially helpful. And remove any details the client might already know, such as the store layout and the location of the cash registers. Put details in that are based on your experience that day. Next is objectivity. So be sure you're only reporting the facts of the interaction. Let the reader draw the conclusion based on the facts that you report. So instead of saying this is a terrible store, cite the reasons. You could say the shelves were dusty, they were out of the item that I wanted, the clerk never looked up from her phone, and I was given the wrong change. Those supporting details allow the reader to draw the conclusion. Similarly, remove feelings, opinions, and suggestions and let the reader draw that from the details in your report. Make sure the story makes sense from start to finish, so no contradictions within the actual shop report. Remove comparisons to other locations and past visits. The mystery shop serves as a point of evaluation for that location on a specific day, a snapshot in time. Careful to not rationalize employee behavior, and I think this is a really tough one. It's tempting to say, well, the server didn't review the menu or offer the special because the restaurant was short-staffed, so I didn't mark her down for that reason. We don't know that that was actually the case. And again, it's up to the reader to make that determination. And also too, to be fair, mystery shopping is about performance improvement. It's not being out to get anyone or to test their knowledge per se. Moving on. Mechanics, which I'll delve into a little bit more. So a well-written report leaves no question as to the events of what happened because the communication is incorrect or muddy. So be sure to use spell check, grammar check. I like Grammarly. It catches things like spacing errors and some common grammatical errors. And it also, if you tend to write in incomplete sentences, which we don't want, it will help you by filling in the needed articles. So that's a good one, and it's a free program. Chrome spell check, also good. Be sure to watch for errors that spell check doesn't catch. You know, so many times we read about the dessert that you ate after your meal. We know it's a dessert, but watch for things like that. Use punctuation and capitalization. Proofread for missing words, spacings, typos. Use the client's language. If the client says if they call them a staff member, you know, don't call them a clerk. All right. Common shopper errors. So here's some errors that we see in editing shop reports: inappropriate comments, scoring problems, inconsistencies, thin or non-descriptive narratives, problems with collateral, poor writing, and grammatical mistakes. So this is just a small sample of the inappropriate comments that we change each and every day. So opinion comments: Robin was the best server I have ever had. You know, instead, let the facts speak for that, let the facts qualify that opinion, and then let the reader decide. The fourth wall, which I call the Ferris Bueller comment, where he turns to the screen and speaks to the audience directly. Remove comments about my schedule advised I would be reimbursed for parking, or comments about the form structure. Inferences, and this is an important one: they were understaffed due to a hiring shortage. Well, we don't know if that's necessarily true. Similarly, we don't know if someone hasn't been trained. We hear that a lot. You know, she obviously had not been trained. So we should only be putting information in the report that can be verified with 100% certainty based on what you know on that day of that shop. Consultancy comments, you know, again, that's something that there really isn't a place for in the report. I should say that there are some reports that do ask for your opinion. If that's the case, feel free to put it in the report. But just as a general rule, general best practice, we should take out comments, opinions, consultancy comments. Over the top wording, you know, fabulous, divine, not appropriate necessarily for mystery shopping. Irrelevant comments, comparisons, that's an important one too. You know, the report is based on only that location on the day that you evaluated it. Very important to not copy and paste comments from one report to another. This can be a deal breaker with a lot of mystery shopping companies. We want to make sure that each and every report is unique. References to the shop process. For example, when I was completing my audit, or if this were not a mystery shop, then I would not return. Comments like that should come out. Comments, again, internal comments within the report. So as I stated above, or nothing to add. The last one is about employee descriptors. And so I will cite an example here using myself. I was a retail store manager back in the early days of mystery shopping, when mystery shopping was in its infancy. At the store level, we received a fax of our mystery shopping report. And I had the misfortune of being shopped the day that I came back from maternity leave with my oldest daughter, who's now 20. I was described, I got a high score from what I remember, but what I remember most is the descriptor. They said I looked tired and puffy, not untrue, but not appropriate either. And I actually fault the editing team there, that should have come out. But so be kind and use references that are static descriptors. Age should usually come out, things like weight, build, complexion, and so forth. Height, hair color, hair length, those are appropriate descriptors. Okay, scoring comments. So comments should explain the score and align with the yes, no, or NA. So, you know, a well-written comment to a question of, was the associate friendly? You could say the associate smiled, made eye contact, and greeted me by saying, welcome, how are you? That comment supports the yes score. So similarly, and this is a very important point, and one that we often return to shoppers to explain, our comments scored no are those that lose points. So anytime points are lost, clients will want to know why. It's very important that you take a minute and explain why it was no, even if it means, you know, just repeating back what the question said in different wording. That is something that we always need to know. Two-part question. So if a a question is, did they smile and make eye contact, and it scored no, we need to know which part of the criteria was not met. So careful to always point that out. Questions that do not receive full point credit, I explained. Watch for reverse scored questions where no is the desired answer for. So for example, did you see an employee using a cell phone? No is the desired answer. Be sure you're not just going through and clicking yes down the form. NA scores also should be explained, especially in the times of COVID. Were you offered refreshments? If it's NAs, is it because there were none? Is it because there was a donut tray but it was empty? Or was it due to a COVID restriction? So always be sure to let us know. Give credit when you offer information before the employee can ask for it. So, and this is common in the course of mystery shopping, sometimes the flow of conversation. If you give your name because you're used to doing it, before it could be asked, don't mark the associate down for something over which they had no control. Okay, inconsistencies. So use the correct brand names, the reference to items, client language throughout the report. So if they term their employees, staff members, use that consistently throughout the report. Watch for questions that repeat or tie to other questions in other sections of the form. So sometimes, for example, there'll be an appearance section at the top of the form, and then there'll be an overall section at the very end, and it asks you to consider all the different factors within the report. So appearance, staff performance, location of item, and so forth. Be sure that comments at the top of the form match those in the overall comment section at the bottom. And watch for contradictions. So if the question asks for the level of engagement, and they tell you to score either truly acceptable or average, below average, be sure that the comments that you give fit the criteria on the form. Overall scores and comments should accurately reflect the entire visit. So an exceptional visit would not be one with slow service times and cold food reported in another section of the report, just as an example. Non-descriptive comments, which I touched on a little bit earlier. So we want to make sure the comments are as detailed as possible. In the first example, the comments are vague, and the positive remark really isn't substantiated. The descriptive comments give a good factual interpretation of what happened, lead the reader to understand why it was a positive experience. Finally, collateral issues. When I speak about collateral, it means anything required to prove as proof of visit. So photos, quotes, business cards, and so forth. Be sure that the photos are an appropriate size. Really, no system will accept a thumbnail size anymore. Really, the best format to use is either JPEG or PNG. Again, this is something to check with the MSP for whom you're shopping. Photos should not include yourself, employees, or other customers. There are some projects that make you take a selfie as part of the report, and that's perfectly okay, but for the most part, we end up cropping out a lot of shopper faces because it can hurt your anonymity as the shopper. Watch for duplicate images, unreadable quotes, business cards. So anything, a quote with a lot of material on it is best uploaded as a PDF. Again, that's something to check with your MSP, but many times we need to be able to read what's within the quote and compare it to what was entered on the form. If the shop ID is required to be written on the collateral, be sure that you're doing it. That's just another way to ensure that the right collateral goes with the right shop if you're on a route or if you have multiples. Be sure that the collateral is uploaded to the correct field, especially with audit projects, with SASE in particular, because we're not able to move photos around. It's very important that the right photo goes in the right upload slot. Orientation should be correct, so landscape or otherwise. So we see a lot of uncropped photos, so if you crop your foot out of it, please. Inappropriate backdrop, so be cautious of what's in the background of the photo. And finally, we need the receipt to be in its full form, not cut off, not unreadable, and itemized if possible. Okay, so some other common writing errors that we see. Again, this is really the tip of the iceberg. There are many more, but these are the kinds of things that can cause a delay in delivery of the report because it takes the editing team a bit longer and can impact the shopper score as well. So incomplete sentences or caveman language without articles. That's probably the #1 pet peeve, I would say, of editors. As I said, too, a program like Grammarly, which is a free program, can help you by inserting the articles for you. Run-ons, big, long run-on sentences. So, mystery shop writing doesn't have to be a beautiful, flowery work of prose. As long as it's fact-based and easy to read, then that's what we're looking for. Lack of punctuation, again, capitalization. Please don't submit reports in all caps. It's a lot of work to change. Be cautious too of brand names like iPad, Wi-Fi, and the correct spelling of those things. Incorrect direct quotes, and direct quotes generally aren't required within the body of the report. A lot of times they'll ask for the opening and closing comment. Remember that anything within a direct quote is just that. It's specifically what was said, so it has to be accurate. But it's usually, for most MSPs, it's perfectly okay to just write in narrative form and leave out the direct quotes. If you do use the direct quotes, be sure that there's a comma after said, and the remark should be within the quotes, and punctuation within the quotes as well. Avoid text language, abbreviations, and any slang, and that will help to create a well-written report. Some common grammatical errors that we see too. So, just ones to keep in mind. It's and its, were and where. A lot of these too are not caught by spell check. So it's a good idea to just proofread at the end and be sure that each one is spelled properly. My guest and I use I at the beginning of the sentence and me at the end. Very common. Also too, I think this is the most common one. Staff is singular. It is not plural. Okay. And finally, if editing interests you, let us know. We are almost always hiring for editors. It's an IC position, so that means that you can still shop if you choose. It's generally 15 to 20 hours a week. We have a grammar screening and an editing test. Industry knowledge is preferred, but certainly not required. We ask that you have a dedicated workspace because it can be mentally heavy work at times. And you'll enjoy it if you have an interest in reading and writing. So with that, I am done, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have. So, okay, great. What is the website to Wordsmith Pros if interested in becoming an editor? So www.wordsmithpros.com. Here's a comment. Often they give you 100 spaces to answer what we think is a yes or no, and some are asking for complete sentences. That's a very good point. Just do your best. We would prefer a complete sentence, a shorter complete sentence than an incomplete one with too much information. But yes, we're finding fewer forms have that requirement. Let's see. What should we do if our score is low, no feedback is given, or you want to challenge it? I would recommend returning the report to the MSP and just asking a question. Ask nicely. I know with the editors that I work with, I have them send it to me, and I usually respond to the shopper directly. No, it's perfectly okay to challenge your score if you don't agree with it. I would just ask you to substantiate why you think it would need to be changed. Let's see. Is it okay to copy and paste within a report for the overall response? Generally, no. You can, if you can just mix some of the words, just use some different word choices. We would much rather see that than a copy and paste. Copy and paste changes generally aren't acceptable, and they cost the editor time. Let's see. I was asked to send a voice response to a survey using my phone. How do you do that? It's interesting. I'm not exactly sure if it's a voice response, like a survey link, maybe. Usually you can upload an MP3 or 4 file to the report, but I think I'd need to see specifically what it was in order to address that. Let's see. I think my grammar is better than the person editing. I was schooled to use a lot of punctuation. Possibly, especially comma usage is different wherever in different parts of the country. Where I grew up in New Jersey, we were told to use the Oxford comma each and every time. Sometimes people don't use it. I will say that a lot of editors we don't mark down for things like comma placement. It's much more important that we understand what you're trying to say. Let's see, there are only so many words you can describe any particular food. Very true. You'd be surprised though. You can use like the thesaurus.com is a good way to expand your vocabulary. Let's see. timeliness explanation back up. I would like to take a screenshot. Sure, give me a moment and I will. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to get to every question. I've thought about applying for the editing position, but have not been in the mystery shopping industry long. I have a master's in library science. Is there a certain thing I should be studying or just grammar in general? That's a great question. It's good to brush up on your grammar. A lot of grammatical mistakes can be caught by a good software program like Grammarly. I know what I look for in bringing on new editors is their logic skill, being able to locate inconsistencies within the report. And it's great. Thank you for all the questions. I can answer any more too. Let's see. I'm spending too much time writing these lengthy reports when they give you 300 spaces and expect a result. Yeah, I understand that that's frustrating. What I can say is the more you do it, the better you get at writing succinctly and still getting the message across. But I do understand that's frustrating. How do you handle repetitive questions on a form? Oh, that's another good question. If a question repeats itself exactly, I would first tell you to go back and reread it and be sure that that it is in fact exactly repetitive. Sometimes they will ask you a follow-up question with a little different wording just to ensure that the first one was scored properly. And yeah, keep the questions coming. And in the meantime, I'll pull up that slide. What's a good app for geotagging a photo? Oh, that's a great question. So I like Timestamp Camera, which is a free app. It's a quick download, and it actually stamps the day, date, time, and location information on the front of the photo. So you pull it up from your phone, take your photo, and all that information just populates right to the front. So it's very helpful. A lot of the times too, editors will use the Exit. It's called Exit F Chrome edition application, and that lets us see the metadata on the report just by running a mouse over the top of the image, if that makes sense.
All right. Well, thank you, Robin, and everyone who attended today's webinar. I hope this webinar has been beneficial. Please check back for our next webinar. You can check back on our Facebook page, the MSPA Facebook page, or we send out newsletters quarterly, and the MSPA website, which is mspa-americas.org. So please check in for our next webinar. I appreciate it. Thank you, Lori and Robin, and we'll talk to everyone later.